In our continuing series of new voices, I've got one of the founders and the executive director of Run Gen Z. It's at Z is a Gen Z organization that is there to help young conservatives get into the political arena. Adam, welcome. Nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
A little full disclosure: we are taping the Monday, November 3rd. I always want to put a timestamp on this. This is probably going to air a little bit later a little bit later this week. But you're an SMU grad. I have just got back from. I have an SMU freshman, and we were reminiscing about the big victory there for SMU football over the University of Miami. So I am personally a bit torn on it myself. But you were there as well, so we were doing a little SMU vibe. But let me start with there because it's interesting. I will make a confession. One of the reasons my son picked SMU was just weirdly get away from politics. He grew up in Washington, sort of in my shadow. Honestly, I totally get it, right? He's there to major in sports administration. Describe to me the culture of politics these days in Dallas, because I did get that sense that it's lower key is probably the way I would describe it.
Yeah.
But I'm curious your experience, Adam.
Yeah, no, I would say, SMU is a great school. I loved my time there. And
Mhm.
yeah, the game was very exciting on Saturday. But it is very understated, I'd say. It's not
Mhm.
very, you think of like UC Berkeley, you think of it as being like a very hotbed, maybe place for
Right. It's not
politics. It's
over. It
not.
doesn't feel overly activist, right? Is
Right,
that the verb?
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But at the same time, you have the Bush Center there. So it's
Right.
like right on the same campus, which I actually worked at the Bush Center when I
Mm.
was a sophomore. Um, and it was a great time. It was awesome to have that resource there. But it's not, I don't think it really changes the culture still. It's very,
Mm.
we're a big school. I know a lot of people from like California come here and a lot of people from all over Texas, but
Right.
it's still not like very political, like you said.
Right. No, it's interesting, and it's funny with the Bush Center that I know if I had gotten to go to a school with a presidential library, oh my God, I'd have dorked it out. I'll be fully honest.
Yeah.
And I have heard that the former president pops into a political science class every year. Obviously, you see him around campus. That it's funny for a guy who definitely wants to be. He does not want to be in the public square. He has made that clear that he's not interested in debating the Republican Party or anything like that, but he does enjoy this part of it. Did you get to interact with him a little bit when you were in your time there?
Yeah, it was funny because when I was a full-on employee. The
Mm.
uh
Oh,
the way I
nice.
got connected with it was my first job ever in college. I was a student fundraiser. So I worked
Mm.
for, it was called Telepony, and we would,
God bless you, man.
yeah.
I tell people, if you want to really earn your stripes in politics, volunteer to raise money. You'll
Yeah.
get more opportunities than anybody else, right?
I totally agree with you, actually. It's like the skills that I learned from there are applicable. There was training, like you had to ask like three times, and it was very like, it was hardcore. And one of the people that I ended up cold calling was the VP of finance for the Bush Center. And he was a Cox, our school of
Hmm.
business grad.
Right.
And we just got to talking, and I said, if you ever need anything, give me a call. And I was a freshman. I was like, this guy doesn't mean it. I'm not actually going to call,
Right.
a former special assistant to the president. Like that's
Right.
crazy. I can do that. But I was trying to some of my family members, and they said, like, no, if he offered, you should call him. So I sent him an email, and I said,
Right.
hey, would love to take you up on the offer. And his assistant like set up a call, and I ended up talking to him on a random like Tuesday for like an hour and a half.
Hmm.
Just like he took the time out of his day, and I ended up that was my freshman year that summer. I said, "Hey, I want to get like a paying job. Like a lot of the internships that you have don't pay." And
Hmm.
so I live not too far from Dallas, and so my
Hmm.
parents. And so I reached out, and he just like forwarded my email to the senior manager of HR,
Hmm.
and I got an interview and all these things. So I was a full-time employee, and so I had to get a government security clearance
Oh,
because
wow. Because you are with, is it enough classified information's in the library? Is that what it is?
no, so mine was like non-document seeing, but there's one door that the
Hmm.
Bush Center is a foundation. That's a private
Mm-hmm.
501(c)(3) nonprofit. And then the museum, where I worked as a guest services representative, was a National Archives and Records Administration building. So there's
Gotcha.
one door to go through that you have to do, the whole, confidential thing. And so I wasn't seeing any documents or anything. But so anyway, I didn't have to go through security clearance to go into the building. So I could just walk around. And I just remember I'm walking around one time and there's a president and it's a secure building. So it only has like two Secret Service agents and he's
Right.
just walking down the halls and it's like, that's the
Well,
president.
it's kind of his office, right? When he wants
Oh,
to
it
go to an
is.
office
Yeah.
outside, because he lives in the neighborhood, it's my understanding, right? Or fairly
Yeah.
close, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was actually at the game on Saturday as well.
Oh, I
We
know.
done.
He flipped the coin. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, no, yeah, it's his office. And I remember distinctly one of my favorite memories of the time there was Christmas. So it was Christmas 2019.
Hmm.
And we got invited to the Christmas party. And it was on the third floor, which is their like his
Hmm.
private offices. And it was incredible. We went up there, and it was the first lady and the president, and they were just welcoming everybody. And they're just such the sweetest couple. They're
They
the
really
nicest.
are. The Bush family I mean,
Yeah,
I've never met a non-nice member of the Bush family. I'm a pretty friendly with Jenna over my time at NBC as well. I mean, they're just high class people, just first class.
very very kind.
Yeah.
So that was incredible. So yeah, I saw him a couple times. We were able to get my picture, and he signed it
Mhm.
and all that stuff. So it was really really cool.
Well, tell me about Run Gen Z.
Yeah,
How did it happen? I mean,
yeah,
it's you're, a couple years out of college and here you are founding an organization. I mean, this is, you know, I'm a huge advocate of like trying stuff like that in your 20s because the later in life, life gets in the way of startups. Life gets in the way of trying to do these things. What I mean by life is the joys of having kids and raising them and mortgages and all of that stuff where you can get stuck in a great job, but you kind of feel stuck. You don't get to be an entrepreneur, and here you are, get to be one. So that's great. So tell me about it.
yeah. It's very exciting, and my favorite part of the job is working with so many young people who are just so motivated, to make change. And politics, everyone says like when you've been in it for too long, you get very jaded and you're just grumpy and nothing changes. Everybody that
I'm
we
trying not to be that guy. I'm really trying. That's part of
right.
the inspiration for this series that I'm doing. It's only people under 30, and we rotate left and right. But it's really, frankly, I find myself feeling better about things the more I talk to young people, left and right, because your motivations are all for the right. They're the right motivations. Doesn't matter what you think, what side of the aisle. The motivation's the right motivation for the democracy.
Right.
That's the way I look at
Right.
it.
Yeah, no, it's great because you have so many people who just see a need and they want to
Hmm.
get involved. And so I'll give a little bit of an overview of all the whole story and everything, but more so also it's looking at people that we talk to every day are running for like local offices. And so
Hmm.
many people come to us and we say, like, hey, you probably make a great candidate. And they go, oh, I can't, or I want to wait till I have a family and I have the picture perfect, poster card
Sure.
and all that stuff, and they think it's like a full-time job, like they think they're running for Congress and their whole life is going to be under a microscope and it like they're going to be followed by cameras. And it's like if you run for school board or city council or county commissioner, sometimes these are not full-time jobs. You
Hmm.
can have your full-time, you can still date if you're, not married, you can have kids, and if you're a mom, what better position to be as a school board member than as a mom? I mean, that's
Hmm.
great. You're very in it for the right reason. So, all that to say, I'll tell the story of Run Gen Z. So, Run Gen Z, the idea actually came from a state senator named Joe Mitchell, and he was
Hmm.
elected. He was an Iowa state representative when he
Hmm.
was 21, and he was ran his senior year in from Drake University. He's from Iowa, and he
Hmm.
ran. And he realized that after he got elected, he looked around and he's like, there's no other young people, essentially, no one on the bench. Because you have a
Yeah.
lot of great congressmen, you have a lot of great, as Trump said, a lot of great people coming up. Just the other day, he said this, which is true, but not going up into like a state representative role, or not a lot of people who are going to step up when their congressman moves into running for senate or something. And
Hmm.
so that's what we realized. He said, we need to find some good conservatives who want to run as well. So that's kind of how the idea was born.
Hmm.
And we started with six members who were all representatives, and we're now at about just about 160 from
All
state
under
senate.
30, or is that sort of the marker in how you?
Yeah, so we
Yeah,
we go up to 35 is kind of what we say.
got
So
it.
18 to 35. The youngest that we have for elected is 18, which is really impressive in
Yeah.
New
Where's
Hampshire.
that? What state?
Yeah, so right now it's New Hampshire.
Yeah.
The guy's name is James the Bolt. He was elected, I believe he was 18 this past cycle when he was elected. But before that, the youngest in New Hampshire is also one of our people, Valerie McDonald, who was
Hmm.
elected at 18 and is doing great stuff there. But we've had the youngest elected officials in Texas and all
Hmm.
over. So really, really interesting. And the way that we do the model behind what the work that we do is we find a lot of these young people, and we're a 501(c)(4), so we have a little bit more political leeway that we can do a little bit different than just a typical 501(c)(3) nonprofit.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we are still nonpartisan, but when you talk about an ideology, that's a little different. So we work with people who believe in limited government,
Hmm.
free markets, and federalism. That's kind of our basic tenets, which I think a lot of people believe in those things.
I was just going to say that's not always these days with free markets. I don't know which party is the party of free markets anymore. No offense. This episode of the ToddCast is brought to you by Wild Grain. Wild Grain is the first bake from frozen subscription box for artisanal breads, seasonal pastries, and fresh pastas. Plus, all items conveniently bake in 25 minutes or less. Unlike many store-bought options, Wild Grain uses simple ingredients you can pronounce and a slow fermentation process that can be easier on your belly and richer in nutrients and antioxidants. Wild Grains boxes are fully customizable. They're constantly adding seasonal and limited time products for you to enjoy. In addition to their classic box, they now feature a gluten-free box and a plant-based box. I checked out the gluten-free box, and let me tell you, they have a gluten-free sourdough bread. We got two loaves of it, and we've done one loaf already. It's a cranberry and almond sourdough bread. It's like the best raisin bread you've ever had, except it's not raisins. It's hit or miss if you mess around in the gluten-free bread world. This is a hit. This is well done. It's not heavy. It doesn't feel like a rock. Anyway, I was impressed. So look, for a limited time, Wild Grain is offering our listeners $30 off your first box, plus free croissants in every box when you go to wildgrain.com/Toddcast to start your subscription. $30 off your first box when you go to wildgrain.com/Toddcast. That's wildgrain.com/Toddcast, or simply use the promo code Toddcast at checkout. Always use the code, get the discount. I'm telling you, it's excellent, excellent bread.
Yeah, so those are kind of our tenets that people come to us through,
Right.
and we work with them to kind of say, all right, well, let's look at your area.
Hmm.
They might be super ambitious and say, I want to run for state senate
Hmm.
against this. It's D plus 32,
Hmm.
and and we say, well, wait, there's an open city council seat. Why aren't you looking at that?
Hmm.
And so we kind of just talk with them and say, have you done anything in your community? Because
Hmm.
really, the adage we like to say is the number one indicator of success in a local race is how well connected you are to the community. Do
Right.
people know your name? Which is sad that it can come down to that sometimes, but if the first time they're hearing who you are is when
But if
you're
they know your name, it means you're circulating the community, and if you're
exactly
circulating the community, you're earning at least the potential to be trusted to help
right.
make decisions. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And that's what I
Yeah.
tell people too, is in some areas, when you think about running,
Hmm.
it may not be a possibility. For example, if I wanted to run, I have a Republican congressman in my area who's well liked. I have a
Hmm.
conservative member of the Texas State House who's super well liked.
Hmm.
State Senate, same thing, county commissioner, all that stuff, right? So there's not really like an opening that I would want to do. But you can be a public servant without being an elected official. You
Hmm.
can go volunteer at food drives. You can go volunteer at, Salvation Army or maybe your church if you're religious, or you can be a public servant without being an elected official. And if that's what the passion is, which is where it should be, why do you need a title to make change in your area? And that's what we tell people.
Man, what a terrific message. I'm glad to hear that because my whole look, I've spent ever since I've left Meet the Press, it's been about, all right, at first, like, how did the media lose trust? But then it's really larger than that, right? How have all these institutions lost trust? And whether it's politicians, the media, big corporations, all of them have become less familiar locally, right? We have local news has shrunk. Um, we have not, I mean, I think Congress is too small, meaning like Congress used to expand with the population. We stopped doing that. And now our members of Congress are weirdly further and further away from their constituents, meaning they only have to represent a faction of their constituents now, and they can get elected. Where when they were right sized, you really had to be of the community of the entire community of interest. Um, and you still have that in local. So it's nice to hear that message. But let me ask you this. How hard is it to communicate locally in these races when you have just uh, news deserts, local news deserts, even in huge metro areas, you have local news deserts because all of the local community newspapers and stuff, it's just all disappeared.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think a lot of people that we find the number one way for that they're kind of getting their message out is door knocking. I mean, they're not
Interesting. Good
relying
old
on,
fashioned,
yeah,
the in real life experience. I like hearing that actually.
yeah. And it's the number one best way to hear what your constituents actually think if you're having to go to their door and
Hmm.
hear their complaints. I mean, that's democracy at its finest. And like you said, it sometimes is difficult to communicate in some of these areas. But the other thing that I think is interesting is you look at social media. If you're famous on Twitter, or X, I should say,
Hmm.
it does not relate to winning your race locally. In fact, it might hurt you. So Facebook, even if you're a young person, is sometimes the better way. And so that's a kind of an interesting thing for people to think about, especially non-Gen Zers. People think as an organization, sometimes we're trying to find the Gen Z vote. That's actually not like Gen Zers aren't as likely to vote for another Gen Zer as an older person is to vote for a Gen
Oh,
Zer.
I was just gonna. It's so true.
Yeah.
My mother is almost 80, and she won't vote for anybody over 50. Like
Yeah.
she goes, it's time for the next generation. Like it's always, always that's where her head is at. And I don't think she is alone on that. I think a lot of older people, I can tell you this, she goes, why am I voting for a president my age? I can barely do this type of mindset. But anyway,
No,
I
yeah. I mean,
digress.
it's that's the thing is people, I mean, I look at my grandfather, he's
Hmm.
82, and yeah, he's tired all the time and it's just like I can't imagine him trying to run a country. And he's
Right.
great. He's still very active, but it's not it's not like the presidency is an easy
Right.
job to do for any person.
No, it's a
So,
24/7 job.
yeah. And so what we say to our people sometimes, or what we hear from them, is that age often is scary for someone who's maybe 24 and they're running, and they think
Mhm.
I'm going to be attacked for too young or being naive or I haven't paid taxes enough or I don't know what XYZ
Right. I don't
worry.
have kids yet. I don't have kids in the school system. What do I
Right,
know? Right.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And it turns out that the like a lot of constituents actually take well to saying making youth a advantage. So if you say it's the Reagan thing, like I'm not going to attack the youth and inexperience of my opponent, if you
Yeah.
turn that around and say we had someone in North Carolina who we weren't really involved in the primary because he was running against another conservative, and so he
Hmm.
was 18 and he was a University of North Carolina student. His name's White Gables and he was running against a 84-year-old 20-year incumbent. And I
Wow.
think the guy's name was George, I forget his name now, but he ran against him in the primary and he won. And he ran on a policy of saying, I have to live with the consequences of my decisions, right? Like if I'm voting to increase taxes or if I'm voting to do this or that,
Hmm.
I have to live 70 more years in this, state or in this area.
Wow.
And
It's interesting.
George
Interesting sales pitch. Yeah.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
so he turned it around. He said, yeah, I'm 19. I'm in college, but I'm willing to go knock on your door and talk to you and listen to you. And that resonated with voters. And he is now a North Carolina state representative. And
Hmm.
and the same thing we had in South Dakota, a little different. We had a young
Hmm.
lady who was running for state senate. Her name is Amber Holz. And
Hmm.
she was Miss South Dakota. She graduated Georgetown Law School. She was a Trump intern, and she was running for the state senate. And people kept attacking her for being young. and inexperienced. She's probably mid 20s, maybe
Mhm.
26, 27.
Mhm.
And she went to our network of other Run Gen Z elected officials and had them all sign a letter that's saying, I was a young person, I ran for office, and here's the good that I'm doing. And she published that letter, and no one else said anything about being a young
Mhm.
person because it is a benefit. You have the energy to go knock on the doors. You have the open mind and the like we talked about
Yeah.
at the beginning to want to have the make the change and be positive.
Well, it's pretty clear, as I've said, it's pretty clear that the American electorate wants some massive change. The last 15 years have been a series of elections where it's been an unsatisfied electorate. So it seems logical to assume that the less experience in office you have, the better you received you might be by this, what I would say is a very um, it's an electorate that's frustrated, right? It's you can, there's a reason we've had three straight one-term presidents. There's a reason we've gone through this. I always say the voters are telling us something, right? You may not, this result here, this you like they're saying, hey, do you hear us now? Right? We want, we don't mind inexperience. We don't mind radically different. We're going to keep experimenting until somebody accepts the premise that you've got to radically change things, not tinker around the edges. And I think that truly has actually been the divide in America, the tinkerers versus the big change people.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's also, and this is where it goes back to the local issues. I think a lot of
Mhm.
people in DC have kind of lost the what the average person's kind of interested in, right?
Mhm.
They're fighting right now about, oh, who is it fault? Is it Republicans' fault? Is it the Democrats' fault
Yeah.
for the shutdown? And that's the
Mhm.
whole argument, not what's happening at the local level. And that's
Mhm.
why when we talk to our people who want to run, it should be based on your constituents. And that's also something I tell people is your congressman has way less impact on the day-to-day lives of the people,
Yeah.
your neighbors, than your mayor does, that your city council does. And if you really want to make a difference, that's where you should run.
Yeah.
Yes, your name will be in the paper if you run for Congress, potentially, if you want, depending on
Mhm.
what you do. Hopefully
Well,
for
if
a
you
good
want to be
thing.
a celebrity, you run for
Right.
national office. Having good life insurance is incredibly important. I know from personal experience. I was 16 when my father passed away. We didn't have any money. He didn't leave us in the best shape. My mother, single mother now, widow, myself, 16, trying to figure out how am I going to pay for college. And lo and behold, my dad had one life insurance policy that we found. It wasn't a lot, but it was important at the time. And it's why I was able to go to college. Little did he know how important that would be in that moment. Well, guess what? That's why I am here to tell you about Ethos Life. They can provide you with peace of mind knowing your family is protected, even if the worst comes to pass. Ethos is an online platform that makes getting life insurance fast and easy, all designed to protect your family's future in minutes, not months. There's no complicated process, and it's 100% online. There's no medical exam required. You just answer a few health questions online. You can get a quote in as little as 10 minutes, and you can get same day coverage without ever leaving your home. You can get up to $3 million dollars in coverage, and some policies start as low as $2 a day. That would be billed monthly. As of March 2025, Business Insider named Ethos the number one no medical exam instant life insurance provider. So protect your family with life insurance from Ethos. Get your free quote at ethos.com/Chuck. So again, that's ethos.com/Chuck. Application times may vary, and the rates themselves may vary as well. But trust me, life insurance is something you should really think about, especially if you've got a growing family, right?
Right, exactly. But
Yeah.
if you want to actually make a difference, and not that
Mhm.
congressmen can't make a difference, but especially as a young person, if you want to make a difference, start
Mhm.
local. And that's where you're going to start with the right ground as you go up. You're going to know to go local.
So there's a counter organization on the left called Run for Something. I've
Yep.
interviewed this Amanda Littman.
Yep.
Sort of a similar vibe, right? They're looking for younger people. Um, they just opened the door to supporting not just Democrats anymore, but if you're an independent and you share their sort of their progressive views, they'll support. because they're looking for independence in red states. Are you looking for independence in blue states? In that same vein where, hey, look, we're looking for new generation of conservatives. We're not saying you have to be a party label.
Yeah. Yeah. So rubber something is a pack as far as I know. So they have a
Yeah, I
little bit,
think I think a little
yeah,
different, but yeah.
a little bit different than what we do, but yeah, they similar idea. What really sets us apart, and I don't think I made this point earlier,
Hmm.
is what sets us apart is when we have someone who decides to run, we look at our existing pool of young elected officials, that
Hmm.
160 network, and we pair them up as a mentorship.
Oh,
And
interesting. Almost
yeah,
like a, yeah. Okay.
because it's hard to, and it's hard to ask someone to mentor you. And what we found is in the races that we're involved in, we actually had a 79% success rate in the races that we paired up a mentor. So there's something like secret to the sauce there of,
Mm,
it's number one, if you're running and you say, "Oh, I have a dinner to go to. Do I wear a sports coat? Do I wear
sure.
jeans?"
Sometimes it's as simple as that, right? Like, yeah.
Right. But also, when you're door knocking and the last 10 doors get slammed in your face and it's a week and a half to election day, it's kind of difficult sometimes to just go back out the next day. So we've seen kind of both of those aspects to
Mhm.
the mentorship. So that's kind of what makes us a little different from what they do too. But yeah, I mean, we work especially because, again, looking at the local area, almost all city council races are nonpartisan, especially,
Mm,
if you
right.
look at school board
Look, it's
races.
why those offices are usually less polarizing. I mean, I have to say it's why I'm such an advocate of nonpartisan primaries because are who are the least polarizing elected officials? Mayors. Most
Right.
mayors are elected in nonpartisan races.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the same thing is if you go and knock on someone's door and you
Mhm.
say, I really care about, gun rights, I really care about, having pro-life views
Mhm.
and closing the border. And the person goes, okay, but what are you going to do? My mail's always late. There's
Right.
potholes in my road and the trash never picked up on time. It's totally, you're not talking on the same
Right.
playing field. That's why it's really important. And that's why door knocking is so important
Yeah.
because sure, you having a base of your ideology is important to know what you believe
Mhm.
in. But if you're running for mayor and you're only talking about
Mhm.
national issues, you're not going to win. You have to know the community.
Is there a litmus test for your candidates, and what is it, if there is one, or how do
Yeah,
you
no,
view it, or you just
right.
know it when you see it?
Yeah, I guess more so that, but no, again, we are nonpartisan. So in terms of ideology, it's what we work with people who believe in, like I said, those limited government, free markets, and
Mhm.
federalism, which is pretty broad. If you're an independent, we'll work with you. I mean, if
Right.
there was a Democrat that believed in that, but most of our people are conservative.
Mhm. I saw is let me just ask let's spend our last 5 minutes here. Give me your sense of where do you think conservatism is going post-Trump? He's not going to be president forever. And right now, in some ways, I would argue the conservative movement is right now more identified next to his name than it is necessarily what conservatism was pre-Trump.
Yeah,
Where do you think this is headed? And, because you sort of have George Will conservatism, right? In one respect. You might have a Rand Paul version of conservatism. You may have a JD Vance version of conservatism. And I could argue that those are three distinct flavors
yeah.
in various ways, particularly Will and Vance, right? Will, free marketeer, Vance, very skeptical of trade agreements. So where do you think this is going? And what do you think the definition of conservative is going to be in, say, 2035?
It's a really good question. I think anyone that says that they know what it's going to be doesn't actually know. But I think it'll be really interesting to watch as we go into 28 into 20, obviously the presidential will
Mhm.
be really, really telling for kind of the
Mhm.
prevailing ideology. But
Maybe. Like I'm not like, is it a full-on larger debate or is it going to be a little more tilted towards the incumbency, right? Like that's the
right,
only open question I have about 28 on the Republican side of things.
right. Which is why, yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting because I think a lot of we go back to the question where we talked about Congress being responsive to the regular citizen. I think
Right.
some of the issues that they're focusing on and the administration are the 80/20 issues.
Mhm.
Like I think one of those that maybe you would disagree with this, but I think men out of women's sports is a pretty 80/20 issue. Maybe
Sure.
more,
And I think like the Law and Order and secure
yeah,
border, right? Some of those, it's sort of like the goals. I always say this about where I think the left misunderstands Trump's success. or popularity in some voter groups, which is, they agree with the goals. Now, they may not like some of the ways Trump tries to achieve those goals. And
Right.
that's, just because they don't like his his tactics doesn't mean they don't want a secure border. Right.
Right.
Like it
Right.
is, that's where I think the left misunderstands some of these negative ratings about, yeah, they don't like the raids, but they do want a secure border. So be careful here.
Right. And it's the same thing with, you look at there's the job market's pretty tough. Why is that? A Trump conservative might say, oh, it's the open border. Someone
Hmm.
who, a different type of conservative might have a different answer. So like you said, it'll be interesting to see. I don't really know, just to give you the answer. I think in our kind of what our group of people that we talk to who might want to run for office in the next 5, 10 years are pretty split. You have a lot of people who are America
Right.
first. You have a lot of people who are are a different type of conservative. But the other thing I like to tell people is, we have a pretty broad view, like I said, of the limited government, free market, and federalism, because a conservative in Maine versus someone in Texas or Nebraska or California
Right.
are totally different. And I think that's true as you look at not just Gen Z and you look at all the other
Right.
generations. It's hard to say, oh, a conservative is this, because a conservative in Alaska, as you know, is totally different than someone from Florida or something. So I think it's
Mhm.
really time will have to tell, and I don't think I can give an answer on that.
No, I mean, and what's interesting is what you're describing arguably is what the Republican Party debate was between, say, 1940 and 1952, when it was the Taft-Eisenhower debate, the internationalist wing versus the America First wing, right? It was sort of the remnants of that from the pre-World War II era. And so, I always try to tell my friends on the left that, this is actually a very familiar argument on the right. We just hadn't seen the America First side have the upper hand in a long, long time.
Right. Yeah. And I think President Trump's doing some great things. Like you said, some people may not like the way that he's
Mhm.
doing them.
Right.
Um, but I think that a lot of people are very happy. And that's kind of an interesting thing is the Democrats used to be a lot more of the average voter, right? And they've
Hmm.
kind of lost that now. And it's now the Republicans. And I know they're kind of floundering to kind of figure out who's their leader,
How to
what's their
get back there. Right. Yeah.
right. And I think President Trump and his administration has done a really good job bringing together the House and the Senate
Yeah.
and all that to kind of have a unified message.
Let me get you out of here on this. How important do you think is the fact that JD Vance is a millennial and not an X or a boomer per se? And is there a inherent advantage there? Or do you expect there to be a little bit of, do you think that sort of Rubio, I look at like Rubio is sort of I still see him as more of part of the Haley wing, sort of that a little bit more internationalist, and he's sort of the trying to bridge this divide between sort of the more isolationist wing versus the more internationalist wing. Do you expect that to be a bigger deal, or that generational and age will matter a lot more in 28?
It's a great question. I think the generational thing is going to be more important than people
Mhm.
realize. It may not be the most important part of it, but a lot of people have looked at, Trump is not a young person. He has
Right.
an insane amount of energy for as old as he is, but he's not a young
Sure.
person. President Biden was not a young person. And I think people want to go back to someone who has a bit more youth and vigor and the
Mhm.
young children, the Kennedy kind of vibe of the youth.
Seeing young children. And I mean, look, that
Right.
was, Obama versus McCain. McCain had grandchildren, I think, right? And Obama had children, right? You're right. That visual it felt like, oh, he's living a life that I'm familiar with when you have kids,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and even, Bill Clinton, who was elected in the 90s, is currently younger than Joe Biden, who it's
Oh,
been,
I think here's the most amazing fact. We'll bring it back to SMU and Mr. Bush. The fact that Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump, I think, were all born within 3 months of each other
right. Right.
in the same year. It's remarkable
Yeah, it is.
that
So I
we've
do
gone from
think,
92 to 2028.
right.
And
Yeah,
each of those guys born in 46 at some point got 8 years. It's
right.
astonishing. The same generation. Trust me as a Gen Xer feels really screwed here.
Well, and that's, I guess that'll how I wrap up my answer to your question there is I feel like that generation, your generation, kind of got skipped over
We did.
because the boomer generation and that generation kind of stayed so long that it
Mhm.
now is jumping to the millennials. And I do think a lot of people are looking to Vance as the next kind of leader because he is younger, and then they skipped all of these people
Yeah.
between. So, but I do think it's going to be good to have more youth
You
for
know, it'd
sure.
be interesting if it's Vance Buttigieg, right? They're basically the same age, same generation, same experience. Both went to the military, both like very, in some ways, very similar. One Harvard, one Yale, one both Midwesterners, one progressive, one conservative. It's just, it would be an interesting. Then you'd take age off the board, and it would just truly be just the next generation debating which direction do we go.
Right, right. Well, I think there's also a lot of young women too,
Mhm.
like Sarah Huckabee Sanders,
Mhm.
Katie Britt, even Ashley Hinson who's running for Senate in
I am.
Iowa.
Do you think there'll be a prominent woman running for president on the Republican side in 28, or do you think Vance's presence just sort of shrinks that field?
I kind of see prominent woman maybe being more of a vice president pick.
Mhm.
I can see that being more likely. I think depending on how
Mhm.
things go, there is some strong secretaries,
No,
but
you brought, I mean, I think there's no doubt. I know Governor Sanders a little bit. I think she definitely is interested in the next step when it's
yeah,
viable. Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
that's for
So
sure.
I definitely see that more as like potentially even a VP, and then there you go, a conservative, a
All
Republican.
right. Well, keep saying I'm gonna get you out of here in this. Now I'm gonna get you out of here. Are you planning to run for office someday?
One day, I think it would be great to. I have a lot of passion for helping people, and I think as we've kind of talked about, I think it really needs
Mhm.
to start from a place of wanting to help people.
Mhm.
So if there's a position that I think makes sense, I for sure am open to it.
So it sounds like though you volunteer in your own community. You show up at these smaller events.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to a lot of political events, but also not in my area for sure.
I think that was great advice, which is you don't have to be an elected official to be a public servant in your community. It's so true. And
Yeah,
it's where the most effective elected local leaders usually come from one of these sort of nonprofits or local organizations that suddenly have been run into a brick wall and say, you know what, I'm going to go change things. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
No. Okay, then get the pump the organization one more time.
Yeah, Run Gen Z,
Mhm.
and you can find us at rungenz.com on any of our socials. Is all Run Gen Z, and we help
All right.
young people run for office.
Adam, great to meet you. Appreciate the time.
Great to meet you. Thank you.